I've often heard you saying this, Neil, and we've got a sort of tech side that James has spoken about there. But you've got a bit of a mission as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I think, I suppose we all, it depends what you believe, but I believe that everyone is got something in them to give and to and do good. So I think one of the kind of bigger pieces that's been there for a long time, from my personal point of view, is how do you change behavior from a very, very young age of people understanding that there's a huge amount of benefit, or there's a huge amount of joy, or huge amount of things that you as a human benefit. And actually it comes through the statement of to make giving a small part of everyday living, and that partly is, yes, what we are doing on our, if you want to call it, from what our mission is on GiveyNation. But I think that there's a whole thing about doing good, and what James mentioned, at the moment we're putting a price on all these things, and that's kind of, call it, money. But I believe that, how do we value time that's given by volunteers? How do we value somebody just doing a good deed? We haven't got all the answers to this, but I think our mission should be that if we do achieve this giving scenario, and I think this is kind of saying about society and, all the negative things that I talked about, technology and so forth. I think there is an opportunity here for us to really realize that actually we can do exactly what we're talking about, which is not necessarily related to just purely pounds, pence, dollars, shillings, whatever. So yeah, to make giving a small part of everyday living globally would be the big mission.
Oh, that's brilliant. Perhaps on the next slide, James, this sort of comes back a little bit to, because at the moment we're sort of just talking in sort of general concepts, and it's probably quite difficult to get our head around what actually are we talking about. What is the infrastructure? But I think, starting off with some of the requirements, I tried to sort of put down what I believed were the key objectives that GiveyNation was trying to achieve. Would any of you like to say whether I've sort of captured them enough in those? I like to see you work in threes, but there was a whole list of things. And Neil, I believe you've started to write an article, which is going to be coming out soon on one of our channels.
Yeah, I think John, you triggered from our discussion where we've been right in the hub of what actions and what activities and we need to do. So it actually made me sit back on kind of going backwards and saying, okay, well, beginning of the year, when me and James were racking our brains and saying, what is all this blockchain stuff about? I basically took a step back, and I've just done a blog which we'll be putting up today on Steam, etc. Is to kind of tear it down to the common man, the language that has to be understood, ignoring all these buzzwords of technology and so forth. So I think I came up with about 7 things that actually it provides out of the box, as they say, this particular technology. And it applies to majority of all the things that are around in the industries, every industry sector, etc. So I believe that we are just addressing one part of a major change that is happening now. And those things are compliance, transparency, tracking and tracing, reduction of errors in auditing and payment processing, fraud security, increasing donor trust, real-time feedback for charities and causes, and better scalability. So those are the 7 things that this thing actually will satisfy. The big challenge is that the technology is so new that how we go about executing that will be the critical path, basically.
I think just adding to that as well, I mean, we've got we're essentially building on our experience in the existing space, really. and we know what the pitfalls are there, and what the common issues are. And going back to sort of building a global platform, I mean, we're you need, if you've got somebody giving money to potentially a team of people on the other side of the world, that there needs to be that feedback loop that comes back, so that trust for the donor is instilled there.
Brilliant. Thanks, James. Thanks, Neil. Yeah. So yeah, I've just got those 3 things, but it sounds like there's those 7, which we'll, and I'm looking forward to that post. I think that'll be really good to. So I think it's just, setting those, high level objectives is really critical. So yeah, the next one was proper, building a little bit on your introductions. I didn't do an introduction at the beginning to you both, but it'd be nice for our community, I think, just to find out how you both fit into the picture. What was your sort of part or role in this? What are you responsible for? Anything, just an opportunity for you to say, what is it that you are bringing to the community in terms of expertise and I was going to say passion, but that's a bit of a overused word. But yeah, what's your sense on here? An opportunity for you to say something.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I mean, I've been very interested in EOS now. Been following it since probably the back end of last year, and it's the first blockchain platform really that I can actually see what I call, just normal people using. I've always thought that, it's got to be as easy to use a decentralized application on as it is to use a traditional fundraising platform. So, if somebody goes to our existing platform, Givey.com now, it's very easy. They can go in, they can find what they want to give to, and they can donate very easily on there, and it's using traditional means. So I think for me, it's trying to steer this in a direction where we can get the same level of frictionless interaction with the platform on the blockchain as we can in the traditional sense, which is what we've been doing now. So I think that's really where it is for me, and we're still early days at the moment. But I mean, this space is moving so quickly that I think we'll see progress pretty fast as well.
Brilliant, thanks, James. Neil, just a few brief words from you as maybe sort of your role and your.
Yeah, I think. Well, my role is really at the end of the day to put the glue together for this dream to be realized that I mentioned earlier. And I do feel a bit kind of out of date, even though I've been in technology for such a long time, that the kind of excitement is that, as James said, this really kind of is an opportunity to get everyone involved at whatever level, and we are not in a situation that actually only, the people who are necessarily well off or rich or whatever are the only people who can actually make an impact. It truly is an opportunity for real engagement at every level, and I think that's the dream, and I see my involvement is to put the right team together, obviously try to get the right sort of finances in place, and really ensure that we are staying on track to kind of deliver this vision globally.
That's excellent. Thank you, gentlemen. That's really good. I love the and one of the reasons why we're sort of showing our cameras on here, it's really nice that our community know we're dealing with real people, and you talked about normal people, and certainly I would count myself very much in that sort of low tech, that nearly everyone I meet who you talk about blockchain, they kind of know what it is, but there's all this uncertainty about it, and I think that's part of what we're trying to do, is make the whole thing very much understandable by all, and I love the way you sort of want to involve people, both in terms of using the platform, but also getting involved with the development of the platform as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think we had this conversation the other day. I think even the language side of things, you know, making the language, you know, understandable to people who, you know, don't know anything about blockchain. You know, that's I think is another key piece that we discussed the other day, which I think is important.
Brilliant. Yeah. So my next question to you was about the and I guess this is about trying to get some perspective on what we're doing. You know, it's very difficult for us to know in the world whether what we're interested in is a kind of a fad or a sort of global mega trend. And I'm just keen to get your sense as to where you see this going and how important it is.
Well, I think we're in the early days of this at the moment. I mean, you know, like the beginning of the internet, mid-90s kind of stage where we're at. But I think in terms of how important is what we're doing, well, you know, if we take an example of trying to, for example, move some money to a project in a third world country, and say you're an individual and you want to do that, there's a lot of middlemen, potentially bad actors involved in that, that can, you know, inhibit what you're doing or siphon off funds from where it's supposed to be going. And ultimately, you know, that breaks down trust, but it's also a barrier for people to be able to actually do that. And especially if there isn't a you know, registered NGO that you're giving the money to, and it is literally just some people in a village, for example, there isn't really anything that, apart from you physically flying over there with cash and giving it to them and watching the things get done, there isn't anything that really solves that problem. And it probably, a lot of it does come down to trust, unfortunately. You know, people are unfortunately inherently distrusting of each other, you know, whether that be through you know, organizations or corruption, that kind of thing. And I think that's the big picture, really trying to solve that problem. And that will also help to get people involved who would never give to charity out of principle. And there must be, it's impossible to know what the statistic is, but I'm pretty sure there must be a lot of people who just simply won't give money to charities because they either believe they're going to waste it and it's going to go on, you know, paying for somebody's company cars or whatever it may be, or over big salaries, that kind of thing. But actually getting those people involved, and, you know, there could be potentially a lot of people who do want to give either their time, money, or services to these people, but they simply don't trust the existing infrastructure. Yeah.
Well, they perhaps they trust it, but just the cost of that infrastructure is so great. I mean, one of the things, Neil, you run a number of organizations. I think your water harvest, is it, in India? And what struck me was the transparency in your own organization of how much, you know, you've been quite clear on how of the money that one gives, you know, so in every pound, how much actually goes to the cause, if you like. This must be a bit, you know, in terms of importance, this is a big thing. This is becoming very big, isn't it, as to how much of my money actually goes to what I want it to go to?
I think there's a number of things. So, you know, if I put my hat on, being on the other side of the chair, if you like, or table, you know, I'm involved in, or have been involved for a long time, for nearly 15 years, on charitable organizations, and one of the challenges I've always seen in them is some of the things that James has just talked about. But I think the kind of the reality of kind of executing those things has been is still, you know, at fault, basically, because the system cannot cope with the key things we've talked about. Trust was one of them, and the other big one is fraud and you know, a lack of transparency that naturally exists. It might not be from the donor side, but it's in the chain that actually goes through, and that chain is not visible. So if it goes from, you know, here to a satellite office to a local NGO, or call it a county NGO, state NGO, then goes down to the local. By the time it really gets to the people it matters to, I think I think if people really probably analyze that properly, I think they'll be shocked, basically, in terms of what £10 actually delivered at the other end. And I think, yet again, what we are doing here is something that it is something that's been long overdue, basically, you know. And I think that's kind of the biggest picture, is exactly that, which is that we want transparency all the way through the journey, and all the people involved as well. So that's the other piece of the jigsaw here. It's not just this money flow. There is a scenario that all these people who give their time freely, they give their, you know, their skills. There is something there that needs to be totally transparent as well, and actually being able to measure it and show the impact of that. And then I think people won't mind if they say, okay, well, actually, this £100, you know, £80 got there, but the £20 was taken because actually, if you were, for example, in Rajasthan, we're talking about water harvesting, but we've also got a disabled kind of school, for example, and the money required for that is and skill sets and support is a bit higher. So your £100 for that particular aspect might be only £80 gets there and not 100. Where if it was normal people and normal children and so forth, it might be £90. So this transparency, not saying that it's all 100%, you know, money flow. It's about saying that it's fit for purpose, and how do we actually measure all this? How do we get contributors who give all those in that journey recognition that actually your effort, your time, or whatever is actually being critical to achieving the impact, basically.